wait just a few minutes. Let me see. I kind of hate to start without her, but I know she's really busy. Let me just check. So hello, everyone. Let me see. We have Stacy, and I see Aubrey, Kristen, Britta's here. Melissa Winkler's here. Zach Bailey, Chi is here. I don't know if Vance is coming too. Our Democrats Abroad Switzerland national chair might join us for the call tonight. Everyone can hear me fine and see me fine? I can see all of you. Great. So my name is Darcy Alexandra, and together with Stacy and Britta, I collectively chair the Democrats Abroad Zurich chapter. And I was listening to, so we had the idea of having these online debate downloads as a way to draw out key aspects of different issues and policies that are important to Democrats right now as we're leading up to the election. And I just want to make sure that everyone has already voted. And if anyone is having any trouble with their voting, to send a message in the comment box so that we can help you. But I think, show of hands, who has voted? Raise your hand if you have. Yeah, good. We've all voted. And there, I see Michaela coming on. Hey.
Hi.
Hey, I'm so glad you made it. I know you were busy with the conference this week.
Yeah, we're in, today's the second day. Yesterday was the first day. Today's day 2.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. Well, and I see Peter's on the call as well. So wonderful. We have people from around Switzerland, from Democrats Abroad, who are joining you today. And I think without further ado, because of time, I want to go ahead and introduce Michaela. And then I wanted to share you, well, maybe if you see on your screen, I really loved this post that Michaela shared recently. And it says, I just want to read her words. She says, I vote to be a diligent American Indian, Alaskan Native voter from my Native communities. I vote to honor all the Indigenous suffragettes, and I vote because I have the responsibility and the ability to do so. With the right to vote, I choose to exercise my right in the hope that my individual vote will help to elevate a collective good. I seek a collective good at a local level, and especially for the current generations, as well as the next 7 generations of Native Indigenous youth. Of course, always keeping in mind the little Native Indigenous toddler by my side. And so I'm going to stop the screen share and then introduce Michaela. Michaela, I'm going to use the, can you still see me? Sorry, you all. I'm going to use your German, you know, your name in German is pronounced Michaela. And I find that when I'm talking about, you know, it's a Michaela Vendiola.
Sounds good.
Michaela Vendiola is a mother, daughter, granddaughter, sister, niece, and cousin. She is an enrolled member of the Walker River Paiute tribe and also has Swinomish and Filipina ancestry. She holds a BA in American Cultural Studies with an emphasis in American Indian health and policy from the Fairhaven College of Interdisciplinary Studies at Western Washington University. Michaela is an Indigenous youth activist and tribal health specialist, gaining work experience in her field and learning about parenthood. She is currently exploring graduate school, and any program will be lucky to have you, Michaela. Michaela's parents, Michelle and Michael Vendiola, are long-standing advocates for Indigenous knowledge, rights, and sovereignty. At the very beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, it was Michaela's mother who was sharing important scientific information and public health updates with her online community that helped me to navigate the crisis. This kind of visionary ethical leadership is at the heart of the Vendiola family. Michaela, we're delighted to have you here with us. You're very welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. I'll just start with saying where I'm at right now. I was raised in the Lummi Nation, and that's where I'm at. We're about 20 minutes or so outside of Bellingham, Washington, and pretty close. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with the United States state geography, but we're close to the Canadian border, about, I'd say 30 to 45 minutes south of the border. From my home, we can look across the waterway, the bay, and see part of Canada. So it's actually visually close to us as well. Let's see. So Darcy sent me over some talking points that you all are interested in hearing about, and I can definitely speak to those. I've worked in tribal health setting in the tribe that I live at in Lummi, and then I've also worked outside of the reservation boundaries or the tribal health system. I also work, what I do currently is I'm a project manager for a nonprofit who we're tasked with distributing and supporting Medicaid expansion and access in this area, in this region. And I'm specifically tasked with doing work related to our tribal relations and alignment work, as well as care coordination for our partners. We have about 50 healthcare partners that we collaborate with and elevate that work to make Medicaid accessible to the people in this area. And I also serve on our research evaluation and data team. So I do a lot of qualitative analysis coding of our partner reports. So that's just a little bit about the work that I do currently. I'm getting a lot of work experience where I'm at. When I graduated, I graduated and walked across the stage when I was 7 months pregnant. And so I graduated, and then I gave birth, and then I've been trying to learn how to be a mom. My daughter's 2 years old. And now in my position, I'm also looking into graduate school and that possibility as well. Early on in the COVID response, you all might have heard of some federal or national recognition of the Lummi Nation because of their response, specifically around releasing public-facing data on current cases. And this is it's pretty interesting to talk about because there is a history of what it means to have access to data for Native people. There's a history of that not working in our favor or being used against us, the data of health data of our people. In this case, what has happened is that the Lummi Nation has really taken ownership over the public health crisis and the response in the tribe. And they are a leading example in this area of what tribal sovereignty, how it can be leveraged to protect and help keep Native people healthy. And not only Native people, I think that's another important piece, but collectively, because even though the response is in the Lummi Nation, the Lummi Tribal Health Center, their public health division, being actively engaged in combating COVID and doing public health outreach, it does impact the rest of the community at large in Whatcom County and in the North Sound region and in Washington State. So early on, I started to watch that public-facing data that was released. It's really interesting because the Lummi Tribal Health Center used Facebook as that platform. And I personally don't have Facebook, but you're still able to look on Facebook and look at open pages. And so that's how I was tracking or looking at the numbers, watching them. They released numbers on people who had been tested, people who were positive, and people who were negative, as well as, what was the fourth one? Inconclusive. There was only one person who had that test. And I think what's interesting is that once other tribes in the area started to see Lummi Nation as that example, it took them a few months, but the response, they started to do the same thing. I think another interesting piece about that is when you're talking about the health system in Washington State and specifically in the Lummi Nation, there's also sector crossover from you have to think about the tribal health system, the state, and then the federal, as well as the county. And the goal during this COVID response was to get those systems to work together, which in a world without COVID, that was still an issue, trying to figure out how to work together. So I think that there have been, of course, negatives and sad times during COVID, but I think that this has highlighted an opportunity to where we can fast track a response that's more sustainable for everybody and safer in terms of working together in the long term. Always, of course, keeping tribal sovereignty and self-determination at the front of that when talking about Native people or tribal communities. I'm just looking at what else I said I could talk about. Okay, so the Native vote. Yes, I have been actively getting the Native vote, or advocating for getting the Native vote out and people submitting their ballots. Most recently, the picture that Darcy shared and the quote, that was an ask from one of my colleagues, and she works for Native Action Network, and asked if I could do the bio and send a picture of why it is that I vote. And I actually sent her a little bit of a longer bio that was just a clip of it, so I can read to you the full narrative that I sent to her. It was just slightly longer, but the second part that Darcy read was the second part of that. The first part, it says, it's titled Why I Vote. My name is Michaela Vendiola. I'm an enrolled member of the Walker River Paiute tribe. In our language, I identify as the Gaidakata Numu Shwadubj Filipina. I also identify as an educated Native, a mother, daughter, sister, granddaughter, and cousin. I've been a registered voter since age 18, and I registered to vote during my freshman year at college during our orientation activities. And then the rest you heard Darcy read. So I think the important piece in that is that when I registered to vote, I was 18 and I did that college orientation. For me, when I think about that, I can identify a gap where some people who are like me or come from my community, they might not be going to college as they turn 18. So that's a place where there's a missing piece. And I've brought it forward in my community, asking some of our educators about what the plan is for getting folks who are graduating college, who are turning 18 while they're in high school, registered to vote, and kind of just like prompting that conversation this year more so, carrying on what my parents have been doing. When I was little, I would follow them around and watch them help get people registered to vote in Bellingham and in Whatcom County, and then we'd go stand on the corners and over the freeway and hold our signs for who our elected officials should be, or who we thought they should be. And so that was kind of a family event that we would do. So it's really intergenerational. And now that I have my daughter, I have her everywhere I go. So when I'm watching these debates and doing this work, she's with me. What else? There's definitely been an increase in young Native leaders voicing the urgency to vote this year. And not only at a state and federal level and local level, but what I'm seeing currently is that there's a shift in the generation, meaning young Natives are also starting to run for elected council in their own tribes. That's significant because it's a passing of the torch, so to speak, or the next generation stepping into that leadership role. And so for my father's tribe in Swinomish, most recently, I can give a good example. Our chairman, Brian Clattersby at Swinomish, in 2019, he was voted out of that position, meaning that the Swinomish tribe voted in another person, and that person was his mentee and a young person who was a recent graduate of the University of Washington. And I heard a story that he kind of spoke that into existence, because when he was giving a speech one time, that the new elected official was in the audience, and he said to her, I hope that the person who's in this audience and is my mentee takes over my position one day. And then that came into reality. In Lummi Nation, I've seen specifically two young people, one person who's a year younger than me, one person who's a year older than me, running for council this year. Unfortunately, they didn't make it through the first and second round of the election process for Lummi Nation. But what I said yesterday to this group of leaders that I was speaking to is that regardless of whether or not the young leaders who were running made it through this year, they'll be back next year, the next time, and we're going to be looking to them to carry on the leadership role. And I think for us for me as a Native person and for my family, what I was taught was to go into any situation or a new experience and be really open and ready to learn as much as you can and to listen. And that's not a teaching that's unique to my family, but it is very unique to Native people and young Native people, because our elders and our parents and our aunts and uncles, they are diligent in trying to pass that teaching along to us, the importance of listening and learning, and trying to then be able to bring into practice what you've learned. And I think I touched on all the points, and I can stop there if that's okay, and answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Michaela. I really love what you say about the intergenerational aspect of voting and civic engagement, and also the importance of listening. You're so right, of just how that's such a fundamental part of Indian country and Indigenous nations and families. And it's something that the broader dominant culture, society can learn so much from. And I think that that was something that I wondered about when I was watching the debate today. I really wonder about that format of political engagement, of like how much, there's not, this last debate was definitely better than the former one, the one we saw that we were all traumatized by, really. But this last one, what kind of listening are we encouraging? What's being learned? I think not an awful lot. And I wonder about, forums for how other people within the United States can learn about how politics happens on Indigenous lands and among Indigenous communities and people, urban spaces as well. And so I love that you brought that up, because it's something that you've been observing and witnessing from your elders your entire life, and now it's something that you're also sharing this knowledge with the next generation. So I just wanted to make that observation. And perhaps to open, if you have a comment to that, of course, the floor is yours, but also to see if there's any questions from people who are here tonight. You can raise your hand. I think I can see almost everyone. Or you can write in the chat. I also want to say that the other thing that really strikes me that I think is such an important story and so inspirational as well is just the leadership role that the Lummi Nation has played, and in the way that and as you say, it's something that is beneficial for the entire society, for the entire state. And this relationship between the tribal health system, the county, the state, the federal government, it's so multi-layered, and you've really been at the forefront of navigating that in a way. So I would love to hear more from you around that in terms of COVID response, but in other areas as well. I think for people that haven't had the honor and the privilege of working with Indigenous communities, it's something that a lot of people simply don't know about, and so much knowledge there that can be shared.
Lummi has definitely taken the approach that the public is safer and smarter when they're informed. That's what I hear our public officials, health officials saying. while also reiterating and reminding our community to practice these physical distancing measures, but still also offering ways that we can engage as a community in a safe way, because the tie to our community, that's what our sovereignty and our self-determination is rooted in. As in this community where I'm at, and let me just reiterate or state for clarity that not all Native or tribal communities are like one another. I think in the Pacific Northwest, because of our location and because of the proximity of our reservations, so that's and reservations are federally designed mechanism, but because of those locations, in order for us to survive and continue forward, we must rely on one another for our own safety. I can definitely answer any questions.
Yeah, can I ask the question of how is it a separate healthcare system, or how does the healthcare system of the nation link to those the other communities around you?
Mm-hmm. It is a separate system. So initially, the tribal health system was ran through Indian Health. It is still Indian Health Services. It's a longish history, but initially, Indian Health was ran out of the War Department of the United States. And then over time, tribes were granted sovereignty rights to self-determine their own health. And that's written into the treaties. If you're interested in knowing about the treaty that I'm at, it's called the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855, and I can put it in the chat if that's useful too, but it'll be harder for me to type it out when I'm talking. But in the treaties of the state of Washington, they identify rights that Native people will have into, sorry, I can't always say the word right. I'm a better writer of this word, perpetuity, meaning forever. And health is one of those. And so the history of it is that initially the Indian Health Services was running all health for the nation. And then tribes were able to claim self-determination and start simply receiving funding and then utilizing that funding as needed. So in this area, most of the tribes have done that. We don't have any Indian Health Service hospitals or clinics. We only have tribal health centers that are run by the tribes. So in the region that I'm at, which is North Sound, Lummi Nation has a clinic, Nooksack Nation, or Nooksack Tribe has a clinic, Swinomish, and I can write all these names down in the chat too, because I don't expect you all to be familiar with them, or as familiar with them as I am, but we have 8 tribal nations in the region that I'm at. So that's 8 different health centers. Now, when you think about the health system at large, there's the tribal health system, and then what's called the Indian healthcare providers, and then non-Indian healthcare providers. And this information is pretty high level, and it's basically what I self-designed my interdisciplinary studies around, trying to learn as much as I can about it and the history. But how it works is that IHS provides funding to the tribes, and then they use that funding as they see fit or through self-determination. The closest IHS facility is in Eastern Washington, and there's a mountain divide between the western and eastern side of Washington, and the tribes on the eastern side are also pretty different. It gets more like the desert over there, whereas we are predominantly what's known as water people, and on the coast. Like I said, I can see Canada from my home. So I think it's easiest to think about the health system at a local level, because the counties have the health departments, and then the tribes also have their system. The tribes have self-determination, so they are the ones who decide who they work with. what the issue is that folks in the county, state, and federal level are not as familiar or educated, or just bypass that system, the tribal health system, when they're unsure of what to do, rather than attempting to actively engage and see what the tribes are doing. There has been a change in that in the past 10 to 5 years, as advocacy and activism work and push from our tribal leaders have stated that our sovereignty rights are what grants us a seat at the table and into perpetuity. I hope that answers some of your question.
So you have the clinics in the tribes, in the reservations, but then do you work together with the county then for the hospitals and, you know?
Yes, they have data agreements and MOUs in place, or memorandums in place. So it's basically contracts. I'm not familiar with that piece, because that's when thinking back to my job, like my higher ups and lawyers would start to get involved, because it is nation to nation, it's government to government. So I'm not familiar with the process of that, but that's how it happens.
Thanks, Michaela. Zach has a question now. So, Zachary.
Hey, yeah. So I was kind of interested. First of all, I take offense that it's a desert on the eastern side of Washington. That's only central Washington. So I grew up in Spokane, and I'm descended from the Klamath tribe in Southern Oregon. But I was interested about the education side, actually. If you guys had an immersion school in the Lummi tribe, or along for the coastal Salish tribes, because I know the interior Salish tribes now, like the Spokane and the Coeur d'Alene, have set up immersion schools and some great feeder programs to be able to go to college as well, which I think is really, really cool. And if you could talk a little bit about that, if that's something that, yeah.
For sure. Sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. That's just how my brain sees it. Once we cross over to the mountains, it gets too hot.
Yeah, no, it's the same thing. Like people on, it's a very much this is interstate rivalry. Yeah.
We do have in Lummi Nation, we have a Lummi Nation school, and then also interesting relating to COVID, Sunamish tribe is opening a preschool on the tribe to self-determine how the preschool and that age is being taught during COVID. That is the newest development that I've heard in the region. Tulalip tribe also has a school. Other than those three, so Lummi, Swinomish, and Tulalip, none of the other tribes in the region have a specific school for their nation. So that means the students do attend public school in the county. So, but even if there's a school in the nation that native is from or resides on, they don't always attend it. So for me, for example, I went to tribal school in kindergarten, and then I went to the public school in the county for the rest of my career, and then I did Running Start and went to college. So we do have those schools, and my family is actually predominantly in education. Both of my grandmothers were in health, and now me. But my parents and my aunts and uncles, they're all in education. So I'm somewhat familiar with the system through their lens, but I'm working in healthcare.
So is everyone insured, Michaela?
Everyone in the tribe? They should be. It is the role of our health center we have insurance staff and referral staff whose job it is to make sure that our tribal members are insured. They can be insured through direct care. They can also be insured through Medicaid, Medicare, depending on qualifications, of course. But I think another interesting piece about the insurance part is that we are seeing that there are gaps in the health system where people who are enrolled Native but don't live on the reservation or don't have connection to their family. So thinking about folks who might have been taken from their families, thinking along the lines of boarding schools, if you're familiar with that history, or young people who are in the foster system. We are seeing gaps of insured people in with those histories, which are also the people who are most at risk and who are in need of the most support. But we do have people in the tribes whose job it is to make sure our people are enrolled. And I think another important piece is that they can receive direct care services within the nation that they're at, or the one that's closest to them. They don't have to be, like, I'm enrolled in Walker River Paiute, which is in Nevada, but I can receive care in Lummi Nation, which is in Washington State. And I can also receive care in the county because I'm insured, because of that support system that's in place. Yeah.
I have a question for you really quickly. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing your time here. It's been fascinating listening to you. I was just wondering, I find your whole talk very fascinating. How can we be more supportive of the activism of the Lummi Nation and other tribal nations in the United States?
That's a good question. I think following or attempting to follow news that is indigenous or native or from the tribes directly, and seeing what they're asking for. So I do that a lot for my job, to provide information to my supervisors and my CEO about possibilities where we could support more. So most recently, I've seen when the fires were happening in the state, and ask for resources and basic needs relating to those. And then I passed that along to my higher ups and they made movement on it. I think that can happen from anywhere though. If you're on social media and see that Sunamish or Nooksack or Lummi or any tribe that you follow or are interested in following is asking for certain donations or resources or letters of support, that's a big piece, because that is what the tribes, they do rely on those support pieces to elevate policy change as well. Like X amount of people have voiced their support that the tribes need this, and it makes its way slowly but surely, hopefully, to the top where change can be made. I think that shift that's happening right now is that the process of getting those needs to the top has been delayed, so we're taking a more local approach. I think that you can look at a local area that you're most interested in supporting or see a lot of action happening and start there. That's kind of what I was taught to do. So for me, I start at a local area and try to expand outwards. Yeah, that's my answer.
I have a question if we have time. I know you said that your specialty, your area of work is actually in healthcare, but since we talked a little bit about education and getting registered to vote earlier, I hope it's not too off topic. I was really lucky personally that I went to a school where I got the opportunity, actually in high school, my last year, if you were above the age of 18, to register to vote in school, in class actually. I don't know exactly how they organized that, but someone came into our class and we got the paperwork, and a lot of us were able to do it like right there and then, which was awesome. And of course, at the time, I kind of assumed everyone else has that experience as well, but that's definitely not the case. And so I was just wondering, I was curious if you have any thoughts on ways that we could try to bring those opportunities to places that maybe don't have that, schools, educational spaces where young people aren't getting those kinds of opportunities. What your thoughts are on that?
have a couple thoughts. I think relating to this area, it gets difficult because once you're like when you're in the tribal nation and then when you go to the county, there is a shift in voter class and between Democrats and Republicans. It's pretty, I can do a drive around the boundary closest to my home, the tribal nation, and see that shift happen along the county line, which is really interesting to me because I think that my interest in getting young people registered to vote while they're turning 18 in high school, my intention is like a good one to get as many young people voted or registered who are interested. But I think that young people are easily or can be sometimes persuaded easily or guided. I think that that's a piece that still needs to be ironed out for Native people, meaning young people need to be informed on who and why they're voting for individuals and what those individuals are going to be doing. What makes it unique for Native people is that we have to know that for our president, we have to know that for our governor, and then our county officials, and then our tribal nation officials. So it's another layer. And the voting process is a little bit different for the final one, the tribal nations. That the education piece on the process for voting is where I would think to start.
Okay, thank you so much for answering my question. And it's been really great hearing everything else you have to say as well. It's super interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Aubrey, for that question. Yeah, I think civic education is so important. And, you know, Aubrey and Zach and who else is on the call right now? I mean, Aubrey and Zach in particular have been involved in the youth outreach, Get Out the Vote initiatives that we've been doing as Democrats abroad. And we face kind of a strange challenge in that we are US citizens living outside of the United States. And so there's that ongoing question of where are the other US Americans and how to connect to them and how to get them interested in voting, because the majority of US Americans who live abroad don't vote. And this last year, we've seen a really big, well, a significant increase in people voting from abroad. And so we're really excited about that. But I always have this question of like the importance of maintaining our connections to our home communities and to local communities, as you have so powerfully stated, you know, that just the tremendous value of that. And that's something that we think through, that I think through a lot since I've been working with Democrats abroad, of like, we have a very diverse group of people too, like all 50 states are here. And so there are many different issues and folks that are concerned about different things, but healthcare has really been fundamental for many of our members. Yeah. And so I don't know if you, maybe just the last thing, if you tell us a little bit about this conference that you're working on, or like, what are your next steps? I know you're thinking about graduate school. Give us a little bit of sense of what's next for you right now.
Well, the conference that I'm helping with, I was actually tasked by my supervisor. My task was to support and elevate the voice of the young leader, Indigenous leader, whose idea the conference was. And I think for me specifically, this conference and helping on the planning team has been a new role for me, because I have served in the role of a Native Indigenous youth leader, but now I'm in the position where I'm going back and supporting the next or the new youth leaders in their work and what they want to do, and while also progressing myself forward in my own professional and education goals, and then also being a mom. which is my favorite one. If I could do that every day and that would qualify as my civic engagement and my job, I might do that, but it's so fulfilling to do both at the same time. And she watches me learn, and I think that's what helps her learn. I think she's going to be sorry, I'm talking about my daughter now. I think she'll be a scientist. She knows 3 elements already from the periodic table, so that's cool. Let's see, to answer the other part of your question, my next step for the youth conference today for part 2, at the end, we're going to be doing a whiteboard session for what the youth think are the next steps that are most important. And what I heard from them yesterday is that there's some basic needs that aren't being met, specifically with the young women and girls. They stated that prior to COVID, they would be able to get some basic needs by going into their school office or health system, specifically talking about like menstrual needs and the health needs that are related to that. And now they're no longer having as much access to that. They can't just go into the nurse's office and ask for a pad or a tampon or what they need. So that's a barrier. And I think that what the youth say is a barrier, or what they say they need is what needs to be addressed immediately. We also had some folks talking about the need to address food insecurity in Snohomish County, which is really interesting to me because that's an urban setting, whereas Whatcom, where I'm at, is more rural. But Snohomish, that's where Seattle is closest to. Snohomish is in King County, and Seattle's King County, and Snohomish County is right north of that. And then Skagit's north of that, and then Whatcom, where I'm at. So next steps are going to be trying to get those needs met for the young people who came to this conference that we helped to plan and voiced what they needed. For myself personally, I am looking into graduate school. I'm not sure what it'll look like with the longevity of COVID, but I'm looking at a couple programs. There's one in North Dakota that I've been considering. They are health focused, but I've actually recently been sparked by like business and law in tribal health, and what that looks like. Not like privatization, but advocacy for tribal sovereignty and self-determination, and innovative ways for what that can look like from these young leaders that are now being elected into office, and supporting what they think the path is going to be, because I don't have all the answers, but like the people that come from my community and the people who are advocates for tribal nations, they can help find those answers.
That's exciting, and we have a number of scientists on the call tonight, so I think there's probably excitement that Avi is already a young scientist. Wonderful, Michaela. So for time's sake, maybe we'll close it there. Oh, just the last thing, I guess. Have you voted already, or are you going to vote on the day? You've already voted.
I voted already, and my ballot was accepted. I checked last night, so it's checked off my list, and I got my flu shot. So, and Avi did. My daughter did too. So I have all those things checked off my list. And this is her favorite chemistry book.
Baby's Big World Chemistry.
Yeah, she reads it every night and every morning. So.
Oh, she's such a sweet.
That's awesome. So,
right. All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And you're welcome to stay for the next presentation if you would like, or I know that you said you might need to leave early, so whatever works for you. But thank you so much again for sharing your time with us, and we wish you all the best. And I will now introduce our next speaker. Thank you again, Michaela.
Thank you. I'm going to head out. Thank you all.
All the best to your family. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
So our next speaker is Chi-Tran Brandley. It's very Swiss.
Brandley, yes, my husband Swiss.
That's hard for me to say Brandley. And many of you know Chi. She's a very well-respected member and very active member of Democrats Abroad here in Switzerland. I'm always really happy when she's at our events, and I really appreciate her positivity and encouragement over these last couple of years. And she works as, we're really happy to hear about her insights tonight as well from her profession. She works as a fund manager, equities analyst who focuses on the healthcare sector. She has 20 years of experience and over this time has developed a strong understanding of the US healthcare system. She holds a BA in immunology from UC Berkeley and a master's in economics and finance from the University of St. Gallen. And Chi, you're very welcome. Now, do you want me to pull up your PowerPoint for you?
Yes, please. I mean, I just put together a few slides of different pieces of research. They're not my own research. It's research I get from various investment banks about, that gives you a little bit of a background of, the kind of the numbers of what we're facing in the U.S. as in terms of healthcare challenge, and then also a few slides on Biden versus Trump, what the main points of their healthcare programs are. And Stacy also asked me to maybe kind of give the investor point of view as to how outcomes, how we would react, or the market would react based on the election outcome. So those are what the slides are about. And then in the appendix, I also have, just for fun, for those of you who are curious, just the breakdown of U.S. healthcare spending in terms of, Medicare, Medicaid, or the private versus government insurance, so forth.
Great. The only thing is, Stacey, can we also but I don't know if you, well, I guess I can move the PowerPoint forward as you would like me to.
Well, the only thing, so I don't know if you want me to go through the slides, or should we just talk about Biden versus Trump policy agendas, what the market is expecting, and then, briefly what I thought I took away from last night's debate?
Sure, that sounds like a good place to begin. So maybe this slide right here.
Yeah, exactly. So that slide. So those are the salient features of. Let me see if I can read this better. Of Biden versus Trump, and as you can see, the Trump plan it's really, I don't think there's really a clear plan, but these are the points that he has brought up, or his administration has brought up before. But I think the main features of the Biden, policy for healthcare are that, one, he would like to create a government-run public health insurance option. And it would be an option, a healthcare plan that's sort of based on Medicare, and be available to people on the so-called the ACA public health insurance exchanges as an option for them to buy next to the commercial plans. And then the second salient feature would be he would like to lower Medicare eligibility from 65 to 60, because, as we know, a lot of people 55 and older already, you can lose your job and have difficulty finding a job again. And in the US, since healthcare insurance is linked to your employer, it's really a terrible gap for people to have years, from the time they have their last job to the time they're eligible to receive Medicare. And then a third point is that very recently, and that's down below, is that he's calling for lowering prescription drug prices using the so-called German model, or rather than international price referencing, like what Trump would like to do, or also the Pelosi plan or the House plan would want to see. And partly to fund all this is a main part of the plan is to raise the corporate tax rate back to 28% from the current 21%. And if you recall, it used to be at 35% before the Trump tax plan. So those are the main features. And then last night in the debate, in terms of what Trump was saying, that he again stressed that he wants the ACA struck down and to be replaced by something cheaper and better, as he said 4 years ago, and never having brought anything forth that was clear in the past 4 years. We know there were plans that were brought in front of the House and Senate, and those plans were anything but better than the ACA, and mainly that the one that John McCain fortunately voted down would have taken away the protection of pre-existing conditions. He would again, he stressed that the individual mandate is a linchpin of the ACA, and therefore, that he thinks the Supreme Court would see it as unconstitutional, and therefore the whole ACA would be considered unconstitutional. And that is actually, a very pressing issue, because that Barrett would, if she's confirmed along the timeline that we expect her to, she would be sitting on the court when SCOTUS listens to the case called California versus Texas, whereby they would need to say whether they agree with the Texas Supreme Court in saying that since the individual mandate is unconstitutional, and it's a vital part of the ACA, that the whole law should be thrown out. And Barrett is a clerk for Scalia, was a clerk for Scalia, who is very much against the ACA, and she has voiced before her skepticism about the law. Conservative pundits who want to assure us that she's okay would point out to, as well as not just her, but Kavanaugh, that they both are very much for the principle of severability of unconstitutional parts of laws, in that a law should be, as much of a law should be kept as possible along the will of Congress when it passed the law, and just the parts that are considered unconstitutional would be severed from the law without destroying the whole thing. Now we know that that Chief Justice Roberts has voted in favor of the ACA twice already. So he would probably vote along with the other two, with the two liberals, to uphold the ACA. But it's And it's a big question whether Kavanaugh would stick to his principle of severability, just as Barrett would, or whether they would vote along party lines, basically, to strike it. And we know how Kavanaugh has pretty much always voted along party line. And Barrett is very much an ideologue as well. And so people, I think a journalist, a columnist for the Washington Post, who have followed Barrett for quite a while, definitely thinks that she would vote in favor of striking down the ACA, and that severability just wouldn't play a role at all in her argument, and it would be left for Justice Roberts to somehow maneuver this in favor of the ACA. So we'll see. So that was Trump. And Biden, the main point for during the debate yesterday was that he clarified what he meant by the public option, because conservatives try to make it as an issue that the public option, having this public option is a backdoor kind of way to universal health insurance, and therefore the undoing of the private health insurance system as we know it in the US. And he clarified that the public option would only be available for to individuals who are on Medicaid, or who would be eligible for Medicaid, but they cannot get it because there are states. I think in one of the slides in the appendix, I showed there's a map of the US showing the states that have adopted the Medicaid expansion under the ACA, and those that have not. So currently there are 39 states, 39 states, the blue states there, who have adopted the Medicaid expansion plan under the ACA to give more people Medicaid. It just made it, it's all measured along whether or not you qualify for Medicaid is based upon the federal poverty level. And it used to be, I forgot the exact percentage, I think it's written down there. It used to be just at the federal poverty level, but then the Affordable Care Act extended it to 138% of federal poverty level. So more people were able to get, more people are qualified to get Medicaid now than previously. But in those states, the non-expansion states like Texas, it's still at the FPL. So the public option would be available to those who would otherwise, in another state would qualify for Medicaid under the ACA, as well as, I guess, like small business owners, or people who are working on their own and they don't get insurance from their employer, and therefore they are currently buying healthcare insurance on the healthcare exchanges. So now the slide after that, the ACA marketplace, or the ACA healthcare insurance exchanges right now have like 4 different types of private healthcare insurances that you can buy, platinum, gold, and silver. silver and bronze, and that just clarifies in terms of how much deductible you get. And they also have to, in order for an insurer to qualify in selling these insurances on the exchanges, they have to provide minimum of certain types of coverage. You know, you just can't sell people plans that actually, you know, that are cheap but don't cover anything when you really need it. And unfortunately, since Trump became president, they allowed those other types of plans to also be sold, actually. But in any case, so he clarified that the public option would only be limited to those kinds of people. So therefore, it wouldn't endanger really the broader private insurance system that we have. And then in terms of drug pricing, he's for direct drug price negotiation by Medicare, because as it stands, Medicare, even though it's a, you know, insurers, I think 60 million people or something. I mean, a huge amount of people, Medicare, Medicaid, but they are not allowed to directly negotiate with the drug companies for pricing. So that's one of the reasons why, at least on a gross level, drug costs are so high in the U.S. because the agencies with the organization with the highest you know, purchasing power is not allowed to negotiate, which is just madness. And then also he mentioned again stressed the risk that the ACA could be struck down with the new with the new makeup of the SCOTUS. And also pointed out that if Judge Barrett or Justice Barrett, potential Justice Barrett, were to vote in favor of striking the ACA down, then 22 million people would lose healthcare coverage. These people were had gained healthcare coverage thanks to the ACA, since it was implemented in 2014. And then, yeah, those are the main points but those were my takeaway from yesterday's debate.
Thank you,
So we can discuss, anything.
Yeah, I think that for me, often when it gets into these, you know, particularly around healthcare, there can be so much detail and so many different aspects of the policy that it can feel quite overwhelming. And I really always wonder about where we can create, I mean, kind of going back to what Michaela was saying about how we learn from one another and the importance of intergenerational learning and the value of listening, just how, like, where on earth do we have those questions about fundamental values? You know, like, what does it mean to care for one another, and what kind of a healthcare system really upholds those values? And I don't know where those conversations are taking place. And like I said, with the debate, you know, they were both presenting their talking points and their arguments, but it just doesn't feel like a very satisfying forum to me right now. I mean, most of us have voted, and I just wondered how many people, you know, did that change the opinion of undecided voters at this stage? I don't know, but it's certainly, these kinds of forums just don't feel particularly inspiring to me. And I wonder where, I mean, I guess it's kind of these informal discussions and communities gathering together and friends and people kind of sharing information and knowledge with one another where we do that kind of discussion around fundamental values. But yeah, I just, I wonder about the profound questions of like, what is it to care? Who does the care work? What is care in our society and how, and in the world? I mean, our society, when we say that, you know, we all live in Switzerland, but in the US, yeah, those are kind of the big questions for me. And I'm wondering where those conversations take place.
Yeah, I mean, in my work, you know, I mean, I can also send that later if you'd like. Like I had a primer. It's of the I did it like 2 years ago on the U.S. healthcare system, just for my team, so we can all understand it better, yeah, including myself. And it's just the craziest. The U.S. has just the craziest healthcare system. It's so convoluted, and the places where it functions well, also with some problems, but where you have low drug costs, and are the government implemented system, like because they're like the Department of Defense, and you know, has its own healthcare system to care for American service people, and you know, retired and active. No, retired are the veterans, but they're sort of kind of work together in a way. And it's you know, that's where you get the lowest drug costs. People do get the care for the most part that they need. I mean, mental health care is you know, is something to be desired there, but in the other things, and then and Americans are somehow brainwashed into thinking that they have the best healthcare system with the private healthcare insurance that we have. You know, and you just see on slide 3. I mean, we have the highest healthcare cost per capita, and on slide 4, it clearly shows that we get very little for that money that we spend, in terms of whether it's the rate of obesity or average life expectancy, cancer deaths. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. And Switzerland has a system that I guess the ACA sort of strives to be. It's a private healthcare system with, as we know, with minimum kind of standards for coverage and protection for pre-existing conditions and so on. And as you can see, it's also pretty expensive, not as expensive as the US, but at least as in my experience with Switzerland, you get the best care when you need it, you know, like, so the US has a lot of work to do, but we've somehow been brainwashed as a country to believe that we have the best healthcare system.
Do others have comments about the debate or any of the topics we've been discussing, or any questions for Chi in particular? I know it's getting late and maybe it's been a long week and folks are tired, but I welcome anyone to comment at this stage. Go ahead, Aubrey, if you'd like to.
No, I just thought I'd turn my camera back on because I disappeared there for a little while. I'm afraid I don't have a question right away. Yeah, it's an important topic, healthcare, huh? But nothing comes to mind that we haven't already discussed, I'm afraid.
Looks like Peter has a question.
Yeah.
back to the Supreme Court, I'm just wondering if what political thought is that if the Supreme Court does strike down the ACA, which I guess would happen in May or June when they issue decisions, then what can the let's say we have a Democratic controlled Congress, what can they do to fix it? I guess the time would be for a new comprehensive plan, perhaps universal single payer as the progressives would like to see, or perhaps sort of a tweak of the ACA to get something back in place that somehow would be less liable to being struck down by a conservative Supreme Court. Chi, do you have any thoughts on that? Have you thought about anything that far in advance?
Yeah, well, I mean, different experts have weighed in on this, and it could be anything it just depends. They would have to, the bottom line is that they have to wait for the decision to see the exact reasoning of the court, and then to do a workaround. And the ACA is not perfect, as we all know. It was that there were a lot of compromise done from its original form. That was a much better law, which would have allowed Medicare, Medicaid to negotiate pricing, and also, to have sort of a panel like the UK's NICE, NICE, a panel of experts and doctors that could determine what is the best course of treatment for, so that along the line of the cost benefits of treatments. But as you remember, it was this whole discussion of, the whole scary thing of grandma's going to be sacrificed, and the death panel and all this. So whether they would try to do a more comprehensive fix or just an expansion of the ACA. And then all of that also depends on whether or not, and how big of a Senate gain do we have. I mean, no fixes are really possible without the Democrats winning control of the Senate. So yeah, and all indications are is that we could narrowly win the Senate again with the 51-49 kind of thing. But that's even there. That's But even that composition of the Senate would not be strong enough to push through something more comprehensive, something more progressive. It will be just piecemeal fix. And it would still take, unfortunately, probably 15 months or so to get done. So, yeah, that's that. So, yeah, I don't have much more to share. So,
any other questions or comments from people? Maybe someone who hasn't had the chance to speak and is dying to say something.
I mean, I did think of one question while we were talking a bit more, if no one else wants to chime in right away. And I guess it goes back to that, that topic of what spending in healthcare and also the results or lack of results that come of it in the US versus in other countries, like in Switzerland. That was really interesting to me. And I was wondering if Chi or if anyone else had any insights about maybe if there's, I mean, I'm just curious, I really have no idea if there's any even cultural elements that come into play as to why our healthcare system has developed so differently than other places like Switzerland, or even like England, which I've heard is a place where the UK, where regardless of how much money you make, you have quite good access to affordable health care. So I'm just curious if anyone has any thoughts on that. I don't even know, how long, for example, the UK has had the healthcare system they've had, but if anyone has any thoughts on why things have developed differently in different places, I'd be curious to hear about that.
Well,
Thanks for that question. I know Kristen has her hand raised. I don't know if you want to reply immediately to that point, Kristen.
Yeah, I was going to talk on that if Chi
No,
doesn't.
please go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead.
So, I mean, I do know a fair amount about the history of healthcare in the U.S. and how we came to have the peculiar system that we have today. And it's really, it's an accident of history, basically. In the U.S., the system of healthcare that we have today started, I believe it was during World War II and in the immediate after-war years, which was a time of very full employment in the US, where it was very difficult for firms to attract employees. They started offering healthcare as part of an incentive to get employees at that time period. And the system of employer-based healthcare really developed in that era. And the problem was that it was before you started getting the kinds of health insurance systems that developed in Europe, especially after World War II, like the National Healthcare Service in Britain, the Sécurité Sociale in France and such. Those all developed sort of after this employer healthcare system was already strongly in place in the US. So they had the advantage in most European countries of not having a well-established private system to compete with when they were developing more national systems. Whereas in the US, when they tried to do that, there was already a well-established industry that basically didn't want to be supplanted by a national healthcare system and fought it quite successfully and has continued to fight it very successfully for all the decades since. And it just keeps on getting further entrenched. And most people, of course, are very happy with their employer-based healthcare in the US. So, you don't have the popular pressure to the same extent either, because there is a large group of the population that doesn't want the healthcare that they currently have to change because they're happy with it. And then there's an even larger group that depends for their livelihood on this healthcare industry that we have in the US and also doesn't want it to change. So it's kind of like this vicious cycle where we can't get something better because we have something worse, but that something worse doesn't want to go away.
That's super helpful. Thank you for that input. Peter, did you want to add something now, or I didn't mean to cut you?
She said what I was going to say, only much better with much better background. So thank you, Kristen.
Great. Anyone else? Chi, if you have any comments to that, or?
Well, I don't know if Kristen, do you know? I think Harry Truman did have the idea of universal coverage already way back when, but he was very much it was actually fought by the doctors.
Oh, doctors have always been against national healthcare systems throughout, everywhere. They never wanted it. So yeah, they've tended to be a very conservative force in terms of increasing access to healthcare, surprisingly. But yeah, many administrations throughout U.S. history have tried to enact more a national healthcare system or more comprehensive health coverage. And there are just many entrenched, powerful groups that fight that.
would have been the key arguments
Need
from
to go
doctors
by.
against? Pardon?
No, I think that Peter has to go.
Oh, okay. Bye, Peter. Thanks for coming.
So doctors, one of the arguments is they don't want to be, they want to keep their sort of professional liberty. So, you know, and I can certainly understand this. They don't want a system like the NHS that you have in the UK, for example, where they are employed basically by the government, and they lose a lot of autonomy in that. And they don't necessarily want to lose the power to set prices. But doctors, like if you look at the history of the medical profession, you will begin to think not very well of doctors. You know, doctors have fought so many things that have improved public health. They fought vaccinations because they feared that if we made it so children didn't get all of these childhood diseases, that they'd lose all of their money because all of their money was coming from sick children. They fought, you know, just every imaginable public health advance. Doctors have not necessarily been on the winning side of many of those issues.
That's
But
fascinating. I realize I don't know very much about that history. So, but certainly I can, now that you bring up those points, I can imagine what some of the arguments might be. Yeah.
But it's really much about the sort of their control of their profession, pricing, their autonomy, the fear about how an insurance system would interfere with their relationship with their patients, which they didn't necessarily escape by making it so there wasn't a national healthcare system in the US, because of course then you've got HMOs instead, which do all of the same things in probably a way that's much more painful for doctors and much more limiting for them than anything that Truman would have created.
Britta, did you have your hand up? Did I see correctly? No, okay, sorry. All right. Well, we just have a few more minutes for our final presidential debate download. I don't know if there's any other last comments from people about things that stood out for them about the debate, or anything that she and Michaela have shared. You're welcome to share those ideas. I've been thinking a lot. I don't know how your anxiety level is among the group, but I certainly have I've been feeling a bit anxious about all the voter suppression that's happening right now, and ballots that are already not being counted. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting this next upcoming period. And we're going to be in touch. You know, we really want to maintain and stay in conversation. We had hoped to have a November 3rd event, but because of COVID, we decided we really can't do an in-person event. So we will be online together in some way. You know, people can stop in, and of course on the 3rd, because of the time difference, we're not really going to, we'll see. We'll stay in communication into the 4th and see when we might have the result on the presidential race. Of course, we will have results on Senate races and House races, I think, but I don't know on how much people are reading different predictions and stuff, and how your anxiety level is, but
Darcy?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, please.
There was a comment in the chat if we could talk about climate change.
Well, we have 5 minutes before the end of the talk, but yeah, Britta, I'm with you 100%. I mean, climate change is one of the most important issues right now, and in both debates, you know, last debate it wasn't addressed. This debate, I don't think it was addressed very successfully. what would you like to say about climate change? Are you frustrated that we didn't talk about it at all tonight, maybe?
I'm a bit frustrated, to be honest, but I'm excited because it is the first time that United States presidential history that climate change has actually been a topic, even though it was a very briefly touched upon topic. I think it is one of the most pressing issues of our time, and I think it's ignored not only by presidential debates, but now also by our presidential debate download, which I find a little bit sad, because it's an issue that really affects us all, no matter, you know, who we are, what we do for a living, what our impact is in this world, the climate change that is coming, that is already here. I mean, especially we had, you know, Michaela talking at the beginning, and I guess I should have maybe asked an issue around climate change there, but she had mentioned the fires that are happening, for example, and affecting her community. We're all being touched by this issue already, and we're kind of sitting there like, there's this GIF where someone walks in with some pizzas and the whole room is on fire, and they're just looking around and they're like, I'm gonna leave. And I feel like that's what we're all doing with climate change. So anyway, I thought it would be interesting to get some of your thoughts on maybe like how it did come up, and if you had thought, I mean, for me, it's just important to vote for somebody who believes in science, which is clearly Joe Biden and not Donald Trump. Donald Trump tends to hire people who agree with him rather than, and ignore the science rather than trusting the science and believing in the science. But it was interesting that, you know, they had talked about oil and Joe Biden had talked about what he had thought on oil and stuff. So I don't know. I just thought it would be interesting to have a bit of a conversation around it, but we only have 3 minutes left. So I guess.
Oh, I wish you should have spoken up earlier, Britta. But in all fairness, we did have Kimmy Eisel, who was supposed to, who had said she was going to come today, and then she wasn't able to come. So we had a third speaker who was going to speak to climate change, and then she wasn't able to, and we ended up focusing an awful lot on, we ended up focusing more on health than climate change and health. So, but I agree with you 100%, of course. And the thing is, it affects absolutely all aspects of our life, as you just said. And so it's really connected to everything, you know, environmental health and access to clean water and access to food and to good high quality food. I mean, there's so many different issues that are impacted by this, by our changing planet and yeah, so I agree with you. Thank you for raising the question.
But I just want to say I'm very grateful, Chief, for you talking about the healthcare, and I'm very grateful for Michaela talking about it. And so I don't want my frustration at the fact that climate change wasn't more of a topic to diminish the contributions that everyone has made to this conversation so far. I think everything, Kristen, that you've added, Aubrey, Zach, as always, has been fantastic. But I just wanted to make the quick point that I really hope that we can start to focus on addressing climate change within our own circles and making it more of a conversation here. So then hopefully this spreads out. And I see Stacy has commented, did you see the Greenpeace boat in Basel? And I have not. That sounds
well, I think a big piece towards fighting climate change is the move towards solar. And that has been quickened very, quite a bit, in spite of Trump's pushback. But it's made huge progress over the past 4 years, and a lot of people don't realize that a lot of more jobs have been created in Texas, or from solar than fracking. And so, I mean, it's not the answer to everything, but I think the price for these panels have come down a lot. The efficiency of them have improved, and yeah, I mean, we put solar panels on our roof since 2 years, and and I'm surprised even in cloudy Switzerland, not optimal Switzerland, how, 8 months of the year, like 80 to 90% of our energy costs are covered. So.
yeah,
I put in panels on my house too, and they're quite great. I have to say though, the climate change debate in the debates right now, I mean, Trump is so awful on environmental issues and refuses to acknowledge climate change is a problem and is something that needs to be addressed. So it makes the debate just, I mean, it's just a dumb debate. You're having a debate between someone whose basically goal is to destroy the planet faster and someone who acknowledges that climate change is a problem. And it just makes, you know, so Biden will say something about his plans, which don't go far enough, but at least acknowledge climate change as an issue. And you know, instead you have Trump being like, well, okay, that's wrong, and Texas don't vote for him. I mean, it's an idiotic debate. It's like, what can you say about it? I mean, as long as the debate is between a climate denier, basically, and somebody who you just can't get anywhere. It's a debate like between the denial of reality and reality, but reality itself doesn't get to debate how to do things well. So it's so impoverished.
And I feel like the huge issue here is that you have this both siderism thing that happens in media where they present both sides as if there are two sides of it, and there are not two sides to this issue. Climate change is a reality. How are we going to face it? That should be the question, not is this side right? Is this side right? And I feel like in media, that's often how it's presented. And it's just, it makes me feel like I'm living in a different universe sometimes, because it's just like, we have to accept reality, right? Like, I think we should all decide that we need to accept science and reality, and we need to be talking about what we're going to do to mitigate climate change, and not, is it real when 99, I mean, I don't know the exact statistics on the percentage of scientists that support climate change. Maybe Zach, you can tell me, is it like 99% or?
So not that long ago, science said 98% of scientists were agreeing that a consensus that both climate change is real and caused by humans.
Yeah, and then
which I can only reiterate is insane, because at our coffee tables we as people do not agree on anything. So yes, we regularly do not agree what evolution is or what a species is. So that's just throwing that out there.
So to have so much agreement in the scientific community is unprecedented, right? And so it's just the reality. And then, you know, you talk about personal responsibility, and of course we all want to live more green lifestyles. Like this is, we want to cut down on meat, we want to take public transit more often, we want to do everything that we can to live a more green lifestyle. But if you read The Tragedy of the Commons, you know that human behavior is such that we're going to take advantage of shared spaces and deplete it. And so there have to be laws in place essentially to manage resources properly. And so we really need to take action and do something. And I wish we were focusing on what specifics they would be, rather than, is climate change real? 98%.
Britta, I'll say your critique is very well taken, but specifically in this context of a presidential debate where one of the candidates for president is a climate denier, you can't escape both siderism, because Donald Trump does not believe in science. He does not believe in climate change. He does not want to do anything to mitigate it. And that is the fact of the matter. Like, so if it's a debate that includes his voice, you're going to, I mean, that's the kind of impoverished and idiotic debate it's going to be, because that's who he is. And it's also, you know, why all of us who are concerned about the climate, none of us had any, you know, none of us were undecided about who to vote for. We've all known for a really long time that if you care about the environment at all, you got to get rid of Donald Trump.
Yeah, and I mean, that is something that's to our advantage here in Switzerland, that there are a number of local and regional organizations to volunteer with and to work with. I mean, in terms of climate action, that we definitely can be in conversation with people here. And of course, this is another issue where Indigenous leadership is so central as well. And that's a really strong point of inspiration for me, is looking at what's happening in the United States around environmental justice issues. And that's where Indigenous leadership is really at the forefront. And so going forward, like if we pivot and begin to think about what comes after the election, I think you're really introducing an important aspect, Britta, that we can be thinking as a chapter of like, what types of policies do we want to be supporting? What organizations are we in conversation with? And I think this is exactly the time to be doing that, because I think it's very clear to me that I want to stay active outside of elections. Like electoral politics is kind of the least interesting thing about what we do. And I think that really focusing on policies and making change and supporting that change in the states is where, particularly around climate change, is where we can maybe get a lot of excitement going. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. If there's not any last comments or statements, you're very welcome to. I don't mean to cut anyone off.
No, I just meant that, yeah, for me, it's so important this time that we keep the pressure on, if Biden wins, that, programs to fight climate change and to have as close to universal health care as possible, eliminate, and we just have to be tougher in fighting and not cave into whatever, Republican demands just so that we can be bipartisan.
Yeah.
That was my biggest frustration during the Obama years. So I think I would definitely work on that more.
For sure. We're going to have our work cut out with that for us, even if Biden wins, right? I think that's clear. I think, Britta, you were the one who recently said that, already he's been selecting some Republicans. What did you say? What was the concrete?
He's been vetting Republicans in his administration. And I think it's this idea that we should reach across the aisles. But I think that this is it's so important that we remember that we need to be making phone calls to be proactive rather than reactive. So what is happening is that our activism has been activated when something horrible happens. And then we're like, this is unjust and this is not okay and we need to make phone calls. But I mean, I was the same. I thought Obama's got this, like he's handling it, it's fine. But now what I realize is what's important is if we get the result that we want and we are getting these elected officials into the positions that we want, we need to be making these phone calls and we need to say, look, are you supporting the Green New Deal? Like, what are you actually doing to fulfill your campaign promises and to support the people in a progressive way? Why we've elected you, and holding them accountable. And then when they're not, giving us the results that we want, maybe we encourage their primary candidate in the next elections and stuff like this. So it's about, I think my switch is going to be going to being proactive rather than reactive after this election, should we get the results. And I think it's what our focus needs to be in Democrats abroad is kind of moving this way.
I totally agree, Britta. And also we have to remember, Obama, he lost a Congress he could work with 2 years in. And, if the same happens to Biden, and it's going to be, if he gets the Senate, it's going to be razor thin. So, and, we've seen how the Republicans wield a Senate majority of 51 like a battle axe to prevent action. So it's going to be, it's not over when there's a new administration. It's going to be a constant battle to keep not just a president who is willing to do something, but also Congress that's willing to do something. So, we have to keep on being out there and remembering that it's not just, and, then down ballot as well, if you're able to vote state and locally, look at what they're doing. And if we care about the climate, we have to try in every single election, at every single level of government, to make sure that the people who are in charge do too. And, now, 2 years from now, whatever, every single time.
Great.
Yeah.
Can I end this by showing you guys a sign that my dad just texted me in Pennsylvania that he saw in his neighbor's yard?
That's great. I love it.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, someone, a friend also shared a face mask where it says, "You're fired." I don't know if you saw, have you seen the Trump face mask where he's fired? I can show you that too. I can pull it up fast enough. Yeah, there it is. I love it. No, no, can you see it? Wait, I have to put my.
That's
Yeah.
good.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
my fingers.
everyone. Thanks so much to Chi. Thank you, Chi, for your
Oh,
time and for sharing your
my
ideas.
pleasure. Mm-hmm.
And thanks to everyone for coming and gathering tonight and sharing your ideas as well. Have a
Yeah.
wonderful evening, and I'll speak with you soon.
Yeah.
We'll be in touch.
Is it
Thank
next
you,
time
everybody.
election night, or what is it?
Yes, exactly. The next time we should see each other online will be election night, and I'm sure we'll be in conversations in between now and then. If you have any, if you have any questions regarding helping voters or anything comes up, please contact us. Kristen has been an amazing resource. Stacy's been doing incredible work. Britta as well. Like, we've all been trying to problem solve. It's really
Yeah.
it can get really complicated. And
This
so,
is the time of year when if you have a voter who's having issues, it's very complicated.
yeah.
And you know, you need to look at all the options to help them, because I don't know, I've done a lot of work helping voters, and I have to say it's like up through the end of September is the easy, happy time, and October is the time when it starts getting really hard.
Yeah.
And it should never be hard. And so that's why we need to get these Democrats in place, and then we can have reform with elections and everything. I mean, it's ridiculous that we even need to register to vote as U.S. citizens. But
Yeah, crazy.
I want
Yeah.
to
Good place to end.
your moderation, by the way. Thank you for hosting this.
Yes, thank you, Darcy,
Thank
for the
you.
moderation.
Good night, everyone. Bye.
Night.
Bye. Bye. Nice weekend, everyone.
Good weekend.